Help me?" The voice was barely a whisper, almost blending into the rustling leaves. Ethan froze. There was no one in sight. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something rotten. The voice came again, closer this time. "Please, don't leave me here." Ethan Parker had heard the legends about Blackwood Forest ever since he moved to this small Oregon town. The story spoke of lost hikers, eerie whispers, and those who entered but never returned. It was all nonsense, he had told himself, until tonight. What was supposed to be a casual evening hike had turned into a nightmare. His flashlight flickered. The dense trees around him seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. But the worst part? The voice. A child's voice. And it was coming from the trees. Main story, Ethan took a cautious step forward, scanning the darkness with his weakening flashlight. "Hello?" he called out. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then, leaves crunched behind him. He spun around, heart hammering. Nothing. "Help me." His stomach twisted. The voice was close, too close. He aimed his light at the towering pines, their twisted branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. A shadow moved. A small figure stood among the trees. A little girl, barefoot, wearing a pale dress that fluttered in the cold breeze. Her hair hung in tangled strands, and her face, God, her face was hidden in the darkness. "I can't find my way home," she whispered. Ethan swallowed hard. "Where are your parents?" She didn't answer. Instead, she lifted one hand and pointed toward the deeper part of the forest. Every instinct screamed at him to run. But the girl, she looked so helpless. He took a step forward. The girl's head twitched, a slow, unnatural movement. Then she stepped into the light. Her eyes were hollow pits of black. Ethan stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. The air around him grew suffocating, thick with decay. The girl's mouth stretched into an impossibly wide grin. "You shouldn't be here." His flashlight flickered again, and in that split second of darkness, something changed. The girl was gone, but the whisper, it was right in his ear. "Run." He did. Ethan sprinted through the trees, branches slashing at his face. The path twisted in ways he didn't recognize. Was he going in circles? The whispers surrounded him now, rising in a chilling chorus. "Don't leave me here. Stay with us, forever." His foot caught on a root. He crashed onto the forest floor, gasping. His flashlight rolled away, stopping against something solid. A gravestone, and on it his name. Ethan's scream never left his throat. The whisper swallowed it whole. The next morning, search parties scoured the forest. They found his flashlight, his backpack, but no sign of Ethan Parker. Just another name added to the legend of Blackwood Forest. Want to know what happens next? Maybe Ethan is still out there. Maybe he is whispering now. The Shadows of Black Hollow. The town of Black Hollow was a name that people dared not whisper. Hidden deep in the forests of North Carolina, it was a place avoided by travelers, feared by locals, and cursed by something far older than time itself. No one who stepped into Black Hollow after sunset ever returned the same. One journalist, Sarah Jenkins, was about to find out why. Introduction? Sarah was a determined young journalist from Chicago, always chasing the next big mystery. When she heard rumors about a cursed town, she knew she had to investigate. The drive was unsettling. The roads twisted like veins through dense woods, the GPS flickered in and out, and the silence of the forest pressed against her car like an invisible force. By the time she reached Black Hollow, the sun was already setting. The town was lifeless, broken windows, sagging rooftops, and an eerie stillness in the air. The only sign of life was a small inn, barely standing at the end of the street. Sarah entered, greeted by an old woman behind the counter, her eyes sunken and hollow. "Room 3, the woman said, sliding a rusted key across the counter. As Sarah reached for it, the woman's hand gripped hers, cold and trembling. "Stay inside at night," she whispered, "and don't go near the woods." Flow in suspense. That night, curiosity gnawed at Sarah. Ignoring the warning, she ventured out into the empty streets. Her footsteps echoed as she wandered deeper until she stumbled upon an ancient cemetery. A name on one of the headstones caught her breath. Isolde Blackwood. Her heart pounded. The witch from the legend. A cold wind brushed past and then, "Leave, before it takes you." Sarah spun around. The cemetery was empty, but the whisper still lingered in the air. Then in the distance, a figure stood among the trees, tall, thin, watching. She ran back to the inn, the shadows stretching behind her. The truth unfolds. The next morning, she sought out the few remaining townsfolk, desperate for answers. Most refused to speak, but one man, Thomas, an old farmer with trembling hands, told her everything. She was betrayed, burned alive by our ancestors, and she cursed this place. Sarah leaned in. What happens now? Thomas swallowed hard. The night of her death is coming. The woods, they wake up. People disappear, or worse, they return, but not as themselves. That night, Sarah made a choice. She had to enter the woods. The horror awakens. Armed with only a flashlight, Sarah stepped into the blackened forest. The trees seemed to breathe, the wind whispered her name. And then she saw it. A flickering lantern deep in the woods. A woman stood beneath an ancient tree, pale skin, hollow eyes, dark symbols carved into her flesh. Sarah's voice trembled. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, raising the lantern. The ground beneath Sarah shifted. Roots coiled like snakes, wrapping around her feet, pulling her down. The next morning, Sarah's car was found abandoned at the edge of town. The innkeeper said she never checked out. The locals said she never existed. But deep in the woods, if you listen closely, you can still hear the whispers. Stay out of Black Hollow before it takes you too. Subscribe message for video ending. Like this story? There's more where that came from. Subscribe now to uncover the next terrifying tale, if you dare. I was on a long road trip, heading to Seattle for work. It was late, I was exhausted, and the only motel in sight was this rundown place in the middle of nowhere. I didn't believe in ghosts, curses, or anything like that, but when the clerk refused to give me room 306, I suddenly wanted it more. Curiosity, arrogance, whatever it was, I ignored the warning, and I paid for it. Main story. The hallway smelled of dust and something faintly metallic. The lights flickered. I found room 306 at the very end. I slid the key in. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The room was normal. Bed, desk, old TV. A faded painting of a field hanging on the wall. I exhaled. See? Nothing weird. Then I noticed something. The closet door was slightly open. Not enough to see inside, just a crack. A chill ran down my spine. I walked over and pushed it shut. It clicked into place. I turned away. Click. The closet door creaked open again. I froze. It wasn't the AC. There was no draft. I swallowed, trying to shake the unease. I reached out slowly and shut it again. This time, I locked it. Satisfied, I climbed into bed and switched off the light. Silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. My eyes snapped open. It was coming from inside the closet. I sat up, heart pounding. The door was still shut, but something was behind it. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it at the closet. Then, the tapping stopped. The door was open, wide open, and in the darkness inside, two pale hands were gripping the edge. Long fingers, too long. I couldn't see a face, just those hands. Then they moved. Something started crawling out. I lunged for the light switch. The room flooded with light. The closet was empty. Nothing. I was shaking. My breathing was ragged. My mind screamed at me to leave. I grabbed my bag, my keys, everything. I yanked the door open and froze. The hallway was different. The lights were dimmer. The walls were cracked. And the other room doors? They were all open. But the rooms were empty. No furniture, no beds, just bare, abandoned spaces. Except for one. Room 305. The door was shut, the only one still closed. I stepped back, heart hammering. Then I heard it. From inside room 305, a soft knock, and a voice. "Why didn't you take this room?" I ran. Ending hook. The next morning I checked out without a word. The clerk didn't look surprised. As I turned to leave, he finally spoke. "You saw it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I just got in my car and drove. But last night, when I checked my phone, I found a photo. Taken at 3:06 a.m. It was me, asleep in my motel bed. And in the corner of the room, a figure standing in the closet. I woke up to the sound of knocking. Soft, slow, rhythmic. I turned over, groggy, and glanced at the clock. 3:13 a.m. The knocking continued. And then, I realized something. I live on the 5th floor. There is no balcony. There is no fire escape, so why was there a man knocking on my window? I moved into this apartment a month ago. A quiet neighborhood, decent rent, everything seemed perfect. Until the knocking started. At first I thought it was a prank, maybe some kid messing around, but then it happened again and again, every night. at exactly 3:13 a.m. and always from the window. Tonight, I decided to end it. I stayed up, phone in hand, ready to catch whoever was doing this. At 3:12 a.m., my heart pounded. My hands were sweaty. Then, tap, tap, tap. I flinched. The sound was so clear. I turned my head slowly, and I saw him. A man, standing outside my 5th floor window. No harness, no ledge to stand on, just standing there. His face was wrong. His eyes were too wide. His mouth stretched too far. His skin was pale, almost translucent, with veins pulsing beneath the surface, and he was smiling. A stretched, unnatural grin. "Let me in," I choked on a scream. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and he was gone. Just vanished. I didn't sleep, I couldn't. The next morning I convinced myself it was a dream, sleep paralysis, a hallucination. But then I checked my window. There were handprints. Long, thin fingers, and they were on the inside. I refused to be in my apartment at 3:13 a.m. I stayed at a friend's place, but my phone buzzed at exactly 3:13 a.m. A photo message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a picture of me, asleep in my friend's guest room, and in the window behind me, the man was there, still smiling, still waiting. I never went back to my apartment, but the knocking, it followed me, no matter where I go, every night, at 3:13 a.m. Last night, I stayed at a hotel, locked every door, blocked the windows, but at 3:13 a.m., the knocking started, and this time, he whispered, "You can't run forever." What would you do if this happened to you? If you enjoyed this horror story, like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying tales. And if you ever hear knocking at your window at 3:13 a.m., don't look.